With so many resources out there, why are we still struggling with productivity? Because everybody is. Today, we're going to break down the real reasons behind this struggle, and I'm going to share some practical tips to overcome them. I know that being productive today can feel like an uphill battle. Between meetings, personal conflicts, never-ending to-do lists, it can feel impossible to get everything done. If you feel like you've been falling short, you're not alone. Most of us deal with this. I was there too. I used to get so frustrated and sometimes overwhelmed because I felt like there were so many things I wanted to do, and yet I never got around to actually doing them or finishing them once I started. At some point in my career, I sat down and decided that if I wanted to lead the kind of life that I wanted, I would have to get really serious about figuring this out. And so what I did is I kind of mastered the dedication because I had so much desire to actually accomplish my goals. And I also found a system that worked for me. There are so many productivity systems out there, and there isn't one magic bullet. It's really about you, your mindset, and what works for you. And so hopefully some of the tips that we're going to talk about today can help you find the right system that can help you get your productivity under control. I don't want you to have to learn the hard way, and I don't want you to have to do it how I did, through trial and error. So let's dive into some of these common things that can disrupt our productivity. The first one is constant notifications and information overload. We live in a very connected world, and we're starting to hear so much about what that actually does to our brains and our attention spans. It's especially true during the workday, because during the workday, you're getting constant pings from different applications, different chats, different text messages, your email notifications are going off, all while you're in meetings or while you're trying to get things done. When do you get to concentrate? You never do. When you're in the zone, it's not just the 2 seconds of you switching context that matters. What happens is it takes you a couple of seconds to do that context switch. Then you have to actually process and deal with whatever the interruption is. And then it actually takes you sometimes minutes to get back into the zone of what you're doing. So one small brief interruption that in your head maybe takes half a minute can impact you for 10 minutes or more because it takes you a while to get back into the zone of what you were doing, the productivity zone, right? So the best thing that you can do is manage these notifications and interruptions. First, you need to set aside your working time. You need to have dedicated working time where you don't allow interruptions. That means putting your phone face down. That means turning off notifications from iMessage if you're on a Mac. It means turning off notifications from Teams and Slack. It means if your email pings, don't look at it. But the best thing to do, honestly, is just to silence the notifications entirely. Go on do not disturb mode if you can. Because even if you ignore those interruptions, there's still a fraction of your attention that's being taken up in hearing it and deciding not to do anything with it. So the very best thing is just to silence these notifications and interruptions entirely. And if you happen to work from home, you have some home distractions. If you happen to work from an office, you have office distractions. So you can silence and do not disturb the electronic distractions, but it's equally important to actually silence all of the life distractions that happens. That means close your door. That means if you're working from home, making sure your family knows they can't interrupt your working time. This is where boundaries come in. So it's really important to put guardrails around your attention, which you can control electronically, but in life, we know those guardrails are called boundaries. So you're going to have to set some boundaries with your coworkers, teammates, and your family. You may have a spouse or a child who's used to being able to text you throughout the day and you answer. That's great, but if it's not an emergency, that really is impacting your productivity. This is especially true for small business owners. Since I've been working independently, people have gotten used to feeling like my time is so much more flexible, which it is so much more flexible. But when we're building businesses, whether it's for someone else or for ourselves, it's so important that we actually dedicate the time and attention to doing that and shut out all the distractions. This is a combination of a system and willpower, right? Implementing the system and then having the willpower to stick to it. It also requires a little bit of communication skills because you are going to have to inform people of these boundaries, especially if that's a change for you. Meaning if you're used to answering every Teams message within 5 seconds, your coworkers are going to freak out if you stop doing that. They are. That's reality. They're going to think something happened to you, basically. So it's really important that you let them know. I am working on my productivity. I'm going to respond to messages at a certain time of day. Communication, boundaries, making sure your notifications don't go off, setting do not disturb. Okay? Then what you do is you have to batch your email messages or batch your IMs, meaning you have to set aside certain times of day where that's when you sit down and do your emails. Or if you have heads down time in blocks of 2 hours, then at the end of those 2 hours, that's when you look at Teams or Slack and you respond to those messages. It's super important to make sure that you don't feel like you're abandoning people, because when you're setting boundaries for the first time, that can feel very worrisome inside. Like, oh no, these people are gonna feel like I'm not there for them and they're used to me being there. Totally understandable. I'm that kind of person too. That's where your communication skills come in handy, where you let them know ahead of time, I'm protecting my mental space so I can get some work done. Nothing about you guys. I'll respond to your messages in a couple hours. Let them know that verbally. And then if you are setting your systems on Do Not Disturb, you can actually have those messages up where it says on Slack, hey, I've got heads down time. Or you put your Teams on Do Not Disturb so it's visible and people understand you're not going to be responding to them right away. But it is best to tell them ahead of time that this is your new system so that people aren't curious about it. And frankly, you'll start getting pings, why aren't you responding? And then that's just more things you have to respond to. Take it from me. Giving people a heads up about a huge change you're making will save you a lot of headaches down the line. The other thing is when I talk about batching emails, so I often coach people to deal with their emails morning, midday, end of day, and get other people into the habit of, hey, email is not instant messenger. Like, email is not instant access to my time and attention. These are the times when I do that. Do I live by this rule? No, I love email. Ever since email was invented, I love getting emails. I love answering emails. So this is one where I'm a total hypocrite because I actually genuinely enjoy emailing. Most people don't. Personally, I think emails are little presents full of information and I want to open them up and see what someone's telling me. Most of you guys don't feel that way. Also, for most of you guys, that is a distraction. So set aside a few times a day and those are your email windows. The way you get really efficient about dealing with your emails is you use that rule of, if it's going to take me less than a minute to deal with it, I'm going to deal with it right now. Because some people create these really complicated systems of like filing things away for later and setting reminders on an email and setting flags on it. This is wildly inefficient. This isn't just my personal perspective. If you look into certain getting things done methodologies and systems, or you talk to a lot of busy executives, they either answer an email right away or they're not going to do it. So if you are in your emailing window and you open up and you read the email, just deal with it then. Don't file it away for later. And I'm just going to use this example of efficiency again. If you read the email, you've paid attention to it and taken that time. If you then flag it for later, you've taken the time to do that. If you set a reminder for it, you've taken the time to do that. When the reminder pops up, you have to look at it and that takes your attention. If you then have to reopen it and remember what the email is about, then what are you doing? You're reprocessing that email twice and then eventually you respond to the email. That is not efficient. Deal with the email when you open it the first time. And I do have a funny story about that. I was reading this book recently. It's called The Burnout by Sophie Kinsella and my sister recommended it. I used to love the Shopaholic books. This book is so funny because this lady is totally burned out in her career and she's a marketing executive and she keeps talking about how her emails keep piling up and then people keep hassling her about the emails she didn't respond to and then she keeps getting reminders about the emails she didn't respond to. And it's funny, right? And it's a symptom of burnout that you can't deal with the small things. But I'm like, that's actually illustrating my point entirely, is that people get overwhelmed by these unanswered emails and they become like this big monster in the closet. Whereas if you would just deal with the email when you get the email, they don't pile up like that, right? It's like your laundry. You can throw your laundry on the floor and do laundry every 2 months if that's what you want, but it makes laundry a heck of a lot harder. It's a lot easier if you put your laundry away and where it goes and if you deal with it regularly. I think you get what I'm getting at. All of these things are just small things you can do to empower yourself to take control of your productivity. None of these are big in and of themselves, but again, it's those small hygiene things that make up for a really healthy, productive day. My final point about limiting distractions is do not pay attention to chats during meetings unless the chat is about the meeting. This is another one where I'm guilty of it. I love to chat during meetings. I have ADHD, the meeting is not keeping my full attention, and I chat. But I have to tell you, even with someone like me who genuinely enjoys multitasking, I'm not my best self in that meeting. And again, we're also talking about the cumulative effect of context switching plus information overload. There's only so much we can process. And so you're actually sometimes exhausting yourself in ways that you don't recognize if you're always on, if you're always answering 5 different things. It can feel fun. It can give you that dopamine rush. It can give you that adrenaline rush. I totally understand it. But it's genuinely better long term for your attention, for your productivity overall, and your productivity in the meeting to just ignore those chats while you're in a meeting. Again, set it on Do Not Disturb, and if you need to, have a separate designated chat window that's for people who are in the meeting, because again, depending on what your business is, again, sometimes it's really important to be able to have conversations about the meeting while you're in the meeting. As a consultant, when we're in client meetings, we're always chatting about the meeting while we're in it. The best thing you can do is make a group chat and everybody talks in that one. That way you're not getting 50 different pings during the meeting and trying to decide which ones are relevant. The more you can curate your attention, the more productive you are in the moment. And then I'm just going to reemphasize, also long term, because there is genuinely a cumulative effect to constantly context switching and to constantly getting too much information. Just give your brain a break. Keep it healthy. The second challenge to productivity is lack of clarity and priorities. And I know a lot of people who struggle with this one. And this can be really challenging because you feel like you have this super long list of things to do and you just don't know where to start. Or you have an idea of where to start, but just being aware of the other things can be overwhelming in and of itself, just that awareness. This is where the expression, don't boil the ocean, comes in, right? Like if you're trying to boil the entire ocean, it's never gonna happen. What do you do instead? You take a few cups of water and you boil that. It's the same thing with your to-do list. You need to choose the top 1 to 3 urgent/important items on that super long to-do list, and you just focus on those 1 to 3 and you do them in order. This is the hard part. This is where a little bit of mental discipline comes in, and then you kind of have to turn your mental blinders on to the fact that the other items on the list exist. Because again, that's information overload, and that's things just quietly pinging in the back of your head, and you're going to have to shut them out. So what that is that's a decision that you make. I'm choosing to focus on these 3 things. Those are where I'm going to put my time and attention, and I'm going to do them until they're done. That's how you stay productive. Because productivity isn't about doing everything. Productivity is about doing the things that matter most and making sure that they're completed. You can't boil the ocean. You have to say, here's the 3 cups of water that I'm dealing with today. You do that for your day and you do that for the week. This is how you get things done. And let me repeat, I understand this one. I'm running a business, I'm a published author, writing a new book, starting another YouTube channel, writing actually another book. And so I understand there's always a million things to do. But every day I wake up and I sit down and I say, what are the 3 things that no matter what, I'm going to accomplish today? And I get those 3 things done. You have to keep the list as small as possible. And then in your back pocket, you kind of keep the next 3, because when you get like really good at this, you can finish those first 3 and still have time left over to tackle the next ones. But that's my biggest tip, is start small. Focus on the things that are most urgent, get those done. And then once you have that muscle built up about getting the most urgent things done, then you can move on to some of the things that are maybe important but less urgent, because all the urgent things are taken care of. But you have to know what they are. And that's where setting priorities comes in. So I kind of gave an example of picking the 3 things from the list, but you might be in the weeds so much that you're like, Gabby, I don't know which 3 to pick. And that's totally fair. Sometimes we do get in the weeds. I've mentioned in other videos that there have been times in my career where just my work list alone was so much that I couldn't see the forest for the trees at all, right? Like I knew I had a lot of trees to deal with, but I couldn't even figure out which order to tackle them in. So if you're in a situation where you genuinely just aren't sure how to prioritize, like I'm saying, hey, pick the 3 most urgent. And you're like, they're all urgent, or I'm getting conflicting information from people. Girl, that happens, okay? Like I have dealt with so many consultants especially who will come to me and be like, Gabby, I know you're saying this is important, but everybody's saying these things are important too. What's really important? Well, you can be that person too. You can be the person who goes to somebody. That could be your project lead, it could be your project manager, it could be your team lead, your actual manager or supervisor. It could be a trusted friend, but sit down with somebody and go over your list and just be like, transparently, I am overwhelmed. I don't know where to start. Can you help me prioritize this list? The added benefit of that is if it is someone like your project lead, project manager, or actual direct supervisor or manager, so a lot of times they won't have any idea that you had so many things on your list. And a lot of times they'll actually help take things off the list. And they'll be able to say, these things aren't important, so let's just not worry about them for a while. Because there's lots of things that end up on our list that truly aren't important, much less urgent. And at some point, those things get to die off. Thank goodness, right? So I strongly recommend getting some help. I've been the person asking for help, and I've been the person coaching other people through how to prioritize their list. And once you do that a few times, the actual prioritization exercise becomes muscle memory. Like, you just gotta put the reps in. And it will be completely natural to you going forward to be able to prioritize your to-do list. And when it comes to priorities, one of the best things you could do is things come in, ask about the priority then, and then ask, is this more important than these other 3 things? Do it before you're stressed about it is one of my biggest tips, because A, it causes you to not have to churn and be stressed out because nobody needs that. But also, it's a much easier question to ask when you're not emotional about it yet. So if you're just sitting there and you know you've got 5 things on your list and somebody comes to you and they're like, can you do X, Y, and Z? You're like, awesome, I can, but also I've got A through G already on here. Let's sit down and figure out which ones need to come off the list so that I can do these. Oh, these aren't that urgent. Okay, right? Easy conversation before you're stressed about it. Now, one of my other tips is that when you've picked your top 1 to 3 things that you're gonna do that day, that is where we're gonna go back to the first thing we said, which is turn off notifications and ignore those pings while you're working on those top 1 to 3 things, okay? This is where discipline comes in. You've got your system and you're turning them off, but maybe some are still creeping in, or maybe you forgot to turn them off. This is where you have to build the discipline muscle to go turn them off and or ignore them if there's some that you actually can't turn off, or to ignore, the little knock on the door and say, busy. Discipline is a muscle that you can build. And this is where you have to be disciplined about your focus. You can do this. I know you can do this. I have all the confidence in the world in you. You're just gonna have to get the reps in. Do the practice, build the discipline. Do you wanna be on camera? Are you a kitty influencer? And just shut everything out and do those things until they're done. Now, there are lots of prioritization systems out there. And one of the things that I always tell people is don't get too bogged down in trying to find a complicated system. And there's lots of names for these systems, which I'm not gonna list here because I think it's overwhelming and I like to just tune things out that I think are irrelevant. One of my biggest pro tips, to be honest. So having said that, if you are a reader, or if you're kind of analytical and you want to know why things are the way they are, or you like to understand how things work, or you actually do want a more structured system than me just saying, hey, prioritize and stick to it. If you need more than that, I am gonna recommend that you read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I know, you guys have heard about this for a long time. It's an oldie but a goodie, and I'm just gonna say it, it's a classic for a reason. This was revolutionary to productivity when it came out, and Stephen Covey went on to found planners and write multiple follow-up books because it worked so well that people couldn't stop talking about it, which is unfortunate in the sense that now decades later, it's kind of a cliche and you're like, oh, my parents read that. I know, I'm so sorry, but it really is one of the best books out there when it comes to productivity. And as I mentioned before, there's lots of different systems. There's lots of ways you can approach this. If you're interested in more of those systems, or if you want me to go deeper on some of them, let me know. I can actually do a review video where we talk about a few different systems. But my biggest thing is just to keep it as simple as possible. And so of the published books and systems, I say 7 Habits is frankly the simplest and most effective if you want to read a book. But you don't have to. We can just talk about it here. You can just do the prioritization like I talked about and you'll be fine. But some people really like to dig deep and do the reading and really understand it. That one. I'll drop a link in the description below if you want to go to Amazon and buy it, or I'll put an Audible link down there because you can also get a free trial of Audible and listen to the book for free. And that is in fact what a lot of busy executives and leaders do, is audiobooks. You can listen to them on the treadmill, you listen to them when you go outside for the walk. I like to listen listen to audiobooks when I'm doing my hair and makeup in the morning or when I'm cooking and cleaning up the kitchen. Great way to multitask and still work on your professional development. So I'll put an Audible link down for the 7 Habits as well, so you can read the book for free if you're not already an Audible member. One final plug for a Gabby specific pro tip though is don't wait to read the book. If you're gonna read the book, that's fine, but don't wait to implement the things we're talking today until you've read the book. You can go through and start with these simple tips I'm giving you while you read that or some other productivity book, because I do think, I'm gonna say it, I think a lot of times people struggle with productivity because they procrastinate way too much. And that is another form of procrastination, is putting something off until you have the perfect system, putting something off until you have the perfect answer. Don't do that. Take the tips we're talking about today, implement them, start to see these good changes, and then you can also go read more about it. Okay? Now we're gonna talk about the third challenge to productivity. Sometimes the barriers to productivity aren't just practical, sometimes they're emotional. What do I mean by that? So a lot of times fear of failure or anxiety or perfectionism can creep in. And all of those things can keep people from starting and completing their work. And remember, productivity is about producing. You have to finish the thing to be productive. Sorry. So if you are struggling with fear of failure or perfectionism or anxiety about the task or the quality of work, one of my best tips for you, besides just do it anyway, which people who work for me get tired of hearing, one of my best tips for you is to learn what good enough is, because that is sometimes the solution to fear of failure or perfectionism. Because what happens is we build it up so much in our heads. It needs to be this amazing thing. It needs to do all this whiz-bang stuff and have all these bells and whistles, and it needs to look a certain way. When honestly, done is better than perfect. We talk about this all the time. Done is better than perfect. And it's not just because perfect never happens. If you think about it, let's say that your perfect target is achievable. Your perfect target may be achievable with 200 hours of work that you don't have. That's a fact. And so I want you to reassure yourself that done is better than perfect, because you're gonna do the best you can with the time you have, which we'll talk about more in a second. So learn what good enough is. In fact, sometimes talk to other people about what good enough is, because sometimes we build this up not just as our own expectations, but we think other people are expecting this super whiz-bang thing. I have a really good friend of mine who's an executive, and she just joined a brand new executive leadership team, new to her. And she had this major deliverable, and in her head, she built it up that it had to be this like whiz-bang business thing. It was very cool, but I can't talk about it. But anyway, but she went to the executive team and just clarified what their expectation for this deliverable was. And they're like, oh my gosh, it doesn't have to be published to the public. It doesn't have to be perfect and ready to go. We just need the information on paper. Well, that took a load off her mind. Then she knew, great, the 3 hours I have to work on this is gonna be good enough, because that's all I have to work on it, and they're not expecting anything more than that. So let me repeat, learn what good enough is, and sometimes sanity check what good enough is with other people. And when you're really skilled at this, then if other people are trying to push that quality level up and up and up, so it's starting to approach perfect, then you can say, I hear you, I would love to do that too. That's gonna take me 5 weeks if we take everything else off my plate. Do we have that as an option? No? Okay, let's scale down those expectations a bit. Makes sense, right? Now, a lot of what I just said talked about time. Because when you're looking at productivity, it really is, what can you do with the time you have? Or how much can you do with the time you have? Or how long will it take to deliver the thing at that quality level that people want or that I want? It's just math. This takes the emotion out of it for me, is knowing it's just math. Some things take X amount of time. And if you want it to be even better, then it's gonna be X plus Y amount of time. Do I have that? No, that's easy. I'm just gonna go back to that as an easy conversation. The related tip is time box your activities to combat perfectionism. 1, learn what good enough is. 2, time box it. I have 4 hours to work on this. I'm gonna do the best I can do in those 4 hours. It's not gonna be perfect, but it's gonna be good enough in the 4 hours. And if you genuinely think that you need more time to do quality work, that is a conversation with whoever it is that you're doing the work for or with. What's the quality level expectation? What's the available time that I have? Can either of those things budge? It's just simple math. When you're in the weeds, it's emotional. It doesn't feel like simple math. These tips are progressive. You are controlling your interruptions. You're controlling your attention span. You're controlling your information overload. You're prioritizing and working on the things that matter the most. And now you're working on how can I do that effectively? Through managing my perfectionism, through managing my fear of failure, through time boxing activities and getting a really good feel for what good enough looks like, and for saying, then that's what I'm gonna do in this amount of time, because that's what I can do. And genuinely being okay with it inside. Because again, this challenge to productivity is all about the emotional barriers. When we let ourselves get worked up about things, whether it's through mismanagement or putting too much pressure on ourselves, it actually makes it harder to be productive. And I'm saying that and you know it. Like you feel it. You're like, Gabby, I know that's true. And I'm like, yeah, so let's make everything easier so you're not feeling so much pressure and stress and making everything harder on yourself. Like it's basically working on hard mode to be doing everything so stressed out all the time and putting so much pressure on yourself. So let's ease off that. Let's do work that's good enough. Let's do work that fits into the amount of time that we have and be okay with the outcome. The third thing you can do related to emotions and managing your mental and emotional state when it comes to work so that you can be in this good flow state most of the time is making sure you take breaks, right? Like I just talked about that book, The Burnout. Well, that lady got burned out because she was not taking vacations. Spoiler alert. I don't think that's the biggest spoiler in the book. She wasn't taking vacations. And she was proud of that fact until she kind of hit this burnout point. That's an extreme example, obviously, but that is the cumulative effect of burnout. And that is the cumulative effect of not taking breaks. And this is another one where you can start small. We're like, Gabby, not everybody can go to Europe for 3 weeks. Girl, I know. That's unfortunately not my life right now either, right? But what you can do is making sure that you're giving yourself breathing room during the day. You can make sure that you're feeding yourself food that makes you feel good. You can make sure that you're allocating enough time for yourself so that you can cook yourself nutritious meals so that you feel better mentally, emotionally, and physically, so you can get up and take that 15-minute walk. People recommend these things for a reason, and it's because they work. And I'm just gonna give this example of we've all been in situations where we're like fighting with some gnarly work problem and like banging our heads against the wall for like 5 or 6 hours, troubleshooting something or trying to get this slide to look perfect, right? I know we talked about perfectionism, but trying to get the slide to look as good as it can, but we're just struggling with something. And then you sign off for the day and you go to the gym and suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, I know the answer to that. How many times does that happen? It happens to everybody a million times because sometimes you need the break to reset your brain. You need to walk away. It's not just once you get to the point of frustration is what I'm trying to point out here. Those are things you need to be doing multiple times throughout the day so that you can reset your brain, so that you can take that breather and you approach the problem better. It's not just a different angle, it's being refreshed enough to be able to approach the problem from a different angle or to be able to approach your work. You will work more efficiently if you take breaks. The more you put off your breaks, the more your quality decreases and you have to spend more time on things to make up for that. We're talking about how to get time back. And so one of the best ways to get time back is to make sure that you're working at your best by taking care of yourself physically and mentally. So take breaks. I'm just gonna say it again, eat nutritious food that makes you feel good. You will be better for it. You will be more productive. And productivity isn't just about work. These are easy examples. We all have personal goals. We all have personal commitments. You want to be productive with those too. Work is the thing that you 100% have to do, and sometimes it's also the thing that causes us the most stress and pressure. But use these productivity tips in your professional and your personal life to achieve your goals. It works. Speaking of getting time back, we just said productivity is about producing. It's about what you can do with the time that you have. But how do you get better at having more time? How do you get more efficient with the time that you have? That's actually time management. So productivity and time management go hand in hand. If you want to learn more techniques that are very specific to time management, to maximizing the time you have, to making sure that you're not always late and rushing around and that you can be as efficient as possible, go watch my video on time management. I kind of feel bad because at the end of the video, I did promise that I would do a productivity video, and this is months in the making where I'm circling back back to productivity. I hope these tips were helpful because we just went through 3 high-level challenges that people face with their productivity and some very practical tips to address those productivity challenges. I will 100% commit to starting a new series where we can go a lot deeper on more productivity tips. Let me know if you're interested in that. Also, I really want to know if you struggle with any of the 3 things we talked about. There's actually more productivity challenges that we can talk about in future videos, but I want to know if you have a productivity challenge that we didn't discuss in this video. I want to make sure it's on my list for the next video. So drop a comment below and let me know, Gabby, those are great. My problem is actually this. Awesome. There's more to this, right? We just started with the top 3, right? Like I said, 1 to 3. There's more to it. So let me know what you're struggling with. Let me know if there's anything that's been working for you so that I can include it in the video and help other people. And also, just stay tuned because I love goal setting and productivity so much. I'll be starting a weekly live series in either this week or next week where we're going to be able to workshop our goals for the week together. And so I'll be on YouTube Lives once a week doing weekly goal setting exercises with the community. And I want you to be there because all of us want to improve. All of us want to change our lives. All of us want to get better at whatever it is that we're doing that we're passionate about, which is why you're watching this video on productivity. So one of the best ways to be productive is to set goals and priorities, and we'll be doing that together every week on YouTube Live. I hope that you join. I'm really looking forward to seeing you. And don't forget to check the description box for the resources we talked about. I'm Gabby from She Makes It Work, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.